Let's get joined up. Today's show is brought to you by Audible, and right now you can get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at audibletrial.com/joinedup. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle or MP3 player. So thanks for tuning in to the Joined Up Writing Podcast, a regular show about all things writing, including interviews with authors, screenwriters, and key figures from the publishing industry, plus loads of hints, tips, and inspiration for all kinds of creatives. You can follow us on Twitter at JU Podcast, leave a quick iTunes review, or just tell a friend. Right, cue that cheesy theme tune.
Put down your pen and stop your typing. Grab yourself a drink, 'cause it's Joined Up Writing.
Hello and welcome to the Joined Up Writing Podcast, where a little procrastination can, and often does, go a long way. It's episode 105, and today we've got returning guest Jackie Kabler, TV journalist, presenter, and she's about to publish her second series of crime novels. She's got lots to say about the submissions process, changing genre, and how she manages to fit the writing around her very hectic day job. A quick update from me before that. Well, it's Easter Monday as I record this intro, and for once the sun is shining here, which sort of offsets the fact that I've just had the first couple of rejections for my novel Safe Hands. Of course, the rational part of my brain knows they're just the first two of what will probably be many knockbacks. But that still doesn't mean I'm totally fine with it, if I'm honest. I'm sure that by the 10th rejection I'll be laughing it off and looking back fondly on these early no's. But for now, I'm just trying to get my head down and line up the next round of submissions, because I'm not going to give up on something that I've spent so long on. And if any of you are out there and you're also in the, should we call it the soup of submissions, then keep swimming and don't give up either, because, you've put all that effort in. But what has been a lot more fun than receiving so many rejections is the project that I've been collaborating on with comedian John Pearson. It's involved lots of laughing, which is perhaps just as well, seeing as it's a comedy project. But it's just been a refreshing change to be able to bounce ideas off another writer and develop new characters and a world to put them in. I really related to a recent blog post by a friend of the show, crime writer Rebecca Bradley, where she talked about the isolation and difficulty faced by a novelist, because there's no one else who can really have the same grip on your story that you've written from scratch on your own, at least until you get to sort of the editing stage or the beta reading stage. So things can get quite lonely, and it's not always fun to have to work out problems on your own. So if you get the chance to collaborate on something as a bit of a break or a refresher, and if you can find the right person to do it with, of course, then I highly recommend it. Finally, before we crack on with today's interview, just wanted to thank regular listener and contributor Jim Snell for bringing the recently announced Killer Women mentoring scheme to my attention so that I could mention it on the show. If you haven't heard about it, it's backed by J.K. Rowling, and it's designed to support emerging writers from Black, Asian, minority ethnic and working class backgrounds. And, it just looks like a really helpful scheme. So if you're interested in that, just Google Killer Women Mentoring to find out more. And speaking of killer women, what a great segue. Let's get to today's interview with Jackie Kabler. So Jackie has spent many years in broadcasting and journalism, including a 9-year stint on GMTV, reporting on some of that decade's biggest stories. She worked freelance and for the BBC, Sky, as a newspaper reporter, a media trainer, and she currently works as a presenter on QVC in the UK. She's already created a series of successful cosy crime books, but now she's signed with Harper Collins to bring us something darker with her debut psychological thriller Am I Guilty, which is out right now. I always love chatting to Jackie, and we started off with a quick catch up. Okay, Jackie, thanks so much for joining me on Joined Up Writing. Really appreciate it. So why don't we have a bit of a catch up? First of all, tell me where you are, where we're speaking from, and how things are going.
I'm currently in a hotel room in London. I've been at work today in London. I work in London and I live in Gloucestershire. But I also had to go this afternoon after my shift at work to Harper Collins, who are my new publishers, which is very, very exciting.
Yeah, brilliant.
And so I had to go there and do some filming for my new book, which I think will be out by the time this podcast is
I think
released.
It will, yeah, because it's soon, isn't it? What's
it's coming out on the 19th of April in ebook, and then the paperback's not till June.
Yeah.
So yes, I think it will just come out.
It'll have just come out. Yeah. So brilliant. Well, why don't we start there? Why don't you tell us about that new book? It's Am I Guilty, isn't it? So tell us about that.
Right. Well, this is a bit of a departure for me because my first 3 novels were a series for a small publisher, and they were cozy crime essentially. And as I wrote the third one of those, I sort of was having this urge to write something darker, and I kept thinking I want to try a really gritty, dark sort of psychological thriller. And I wasn't honestly sure if I could pull it off, but because I've always written I've only written 3 books, but they were all quite light-hearted, cozy crime with a bit of humour and a bit of romance, and I just was having this urge. So I thought, you know what, I'm just going to try it. I'm going to see. And I got the idea from a true crime podcast. I listen to a lot of podcasts.
Me too.
Yeah. Well, yeah, you have to, don't you? I listen to every episode of yours, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
I'm a big fan. I do love it. But I was listening to an American true crime podcast called Breakdown. And one of these series of that podcast was about, I won't give too much away, but it was about a crime. And I was listening to it and I thought, do you know what? That crime doesn't really happen in the UK. And there are reasons why it doesn't. But I thought I'd just do some research. And so I spoke to some organisations and to the police, and I actually couldn't find a single prosecuted case of this particular crime in the UK. There have been instances of it, but nobody I could find has ever been prosecuted. So I thought, that might make an interesting topic for a novel. So I started writing this book. And that became Am I Guilty, which was subsequently bought. I got a 2-book deal with Harper Collins, which was just ridiculously exciting. Yeah. And it's coming out in April.
That's brilliant.
Well, now.
It's out now as we speak. As this goes out. So without, obviously, it sounds like you can't give too much away, but try and give us a bit of a sense of the premise.
Okay. So it's about 3 women. It's told from the point of view of 3 different women, so it switches between the 3 different points of view, and there are 2 families involved as well. I've actually set it in Gloucestershire, where I live, because I'm lazy, basically. And it was easy it was easy to set it there. But basically, when the book begins, a terrible thing has happened before the book begins, and it sort of gradually unfolds what happened, and did it really happen like everyone thinks it happened? And there's a lot of lying going on. Everyone has something to hide, and everyone is lying about something. And then the truth sort of gradually starts to come out. But it is about a crime that, as I said, is pretty unusual in the UK.
Very intriguing.
And it's pretty dark, actually. It is pretty dark. And even as I wrote it, I wasn't sure if it was going to work, but it seems to have worked okay.
So sounds like you had fun doing it as well, writing it.
I really did. I really enjoyed it. And in some ways, it was a slightly maybe cynical decision on my part, because I really wanted to try and write something more commercial. My cozy crime books, while they did have a certain very lovely loyal readership, cozy crime really isn't massive in the UK. It's definitely bigger in America. And actually, apparently, it's just really taking off in France. Apparently, they've just got very excited about Agatha Raisin, the Agatha Raisin books. So France is suddenly getting into cozy crime, but the UK isn't massively into it. So I always felt that although, I had lovely loyal readers who always wanted more of my Cora Baxter books, that was the series, the Cora Baxter Mysteries, I sort of felt that I was limiting myself in terms of readership. And so I really thought, I want to kind of write the sort of book that I generally read, which is a bit more gritty, psychological thriller, suspense type novel. And so partly it was just because I wanted to try to write that sort of book, but also because I just thought it would have a bigger audience. And so, partly a commercial decision, I suppose, really.
That's refreshing, though, in terms of the fact that you're kind of, honest about that, because, as you say, sometimes people sort of forget the commercial side of it. And it's probably, it's obviously a big part of it is that, but also the fact that you actually enjoy reading that stuff as well. Did you read that much cozy crime before that, or was the majority of what you read dark stuff?
Yeah, no, I've never read much cozy crime. Weirdly, I think when I started writing my first Cora Baxter mystery, I didn't even know it was cozy crime. I just knew that I wanted to write sort of a kind of light-hearted murder mystery with a bit of romance in there as well. And then I realised that it was a genre and it was called cozy crime. So I didn't really set out to write that. But
and you're sort of drawing on your personal experience in terms of the with the TV stuff.
That's right, yes, because obviously, for those who don't know, I was a TV news reporter for quite a long time and worked on GMTV when it was GMTV in those days. And my Cora Baxter mysteries are about a breakfast TV news reporter who gets involved in solving murders. So it was very much based on my own experiences, I suppose, in that way. I didn't have to do too much research, and it was kind of a slightly easier sort of genre for me to write then. But I think, I suppose I've got older and my tastes have matured a bit, and I know what I really like to read now, and I just wanted to write something a bit more like what I read.
I completely. I mean, I was similar to a certain extent in that I might have talked about this before, but it's kind of like one of those penny drop kind of moments where there's a book that I was writing many years ago that would probably never ever see the light of day unless it has a massive rewrite. But that's a completely different genre. I mean, the novel that I've got on submission at the minute is crime, but that book was I guess it's kind of in the sort of Douglas Adams kind of mold. It's sort of got elements. Wow. It's kind of comic. It's got bits of fantasy, but not like high fantasy. It was kind of set in the real world. But anyway, I had in the past I've read lots of those kind of books and like Terry Pratchett and all those kind of things. But the thing that I consume the most, both in terms of books and TV and film and everything else, is crime. I absolutely, that is definitely my favourite genre across all different things. And then it was like one day it was like, you're reading all this stuff, you're watching all this stuff, you absolutely love it, you're sort of obsessed with it, and yet I've never really thought to write it.
Absolutely the same for me. I know, it's funny. And I do think actually that crime is such a great genre, because say if you're a romance writer, for example, you can't really stick a gory murder into a romance.
No.
Or if you're a sci-fi writer, you have to kind of stick to the genre, whereas crime, you can have a little bit of romance, and you can have a little bit of humour.
It's such a broad church, really.
Isn't it? Yeah.
But as you say, I mean, you haven't, ostensibly, you've written crime. Your first series of books were crime. It's just that they were, as you say, they were kind of more kind of cozy or whatever. But they still come under the crime, the crime banner. So was it in terms of like when you were pitching it? Did you find? Presumably it made a difference because you sort of had 3 books that you'd had published, or did it not, because they were completely different genre?
You say that, no. A lot of people have said, it must have been much easier this time to get a book deal because you've already written 3 books. Nobody even asked or cared.
Right.
I actually sort of started again. I did have an agent for my first 3 books, but I kind of almost treated this as a debut again, because it is my debut sort of psychological thriller type book. And I thought for me it was best to sort of almost start again. So I actually decided I'd find a new agent, and my new agent, it didn't take that long actually this time, which was, again, the last time I tried to get an agent, it took so long. It took months and months and months and months and months and months, and tons of rejections, and maybe partly because of the cozy crime genre actually, but or maybe just because they didn't like my books, but probably.
Well, it's hard, isn't it? It's
But this time it was so much easier. I had an interest from quite a few agents, but not one of them wanted to know about my previous books, because all they care about is this book that they're reading now, and do they like this book, and will this book sell?
Yeah.
So actually, most of them didn't even ask or care really about what I'd done before. And when I eventually signed with a fantastic agent, the publishers, as far as I know, she didn't even tell the publishers really what I had done before, particularly because it was all about this current book. So I suppose if you're a big name, it's going to help what you've written previously. But I think when you're sort of starting out, then it's not really that important.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because as you say, I can sort of see both sides. I mean, I definitely think the genre thing is is a really, really big thing, because I know even in my kind of initial conversations with agents, like one of the questions that they ask when they do start to come back to you is, and can I just check, you're planning on continuing to write crime books.
Yes.
So they don't want you to say, thanks for picking that book up, and the next one's high fantasy or whatever. Exactly. So I think you're right. I think they do sort of, check that. And again, you think, well, I've got these other books that I wrote before, but unless they're sort of in the same genre and they're of the same level, they're not really interested. But I would imagine the flip side of it is, though, that you've kind of proven that you can do it in terms of you've done it more than once. You've you've worked with editors, you've hit your deadlines, you've got actual books on the shelf, and you've got your online profile and everything else, and with what you do with your job and the fact that you can sell books. You think that would kind of that's the commercial side of it would sort of help.
I think that side of it definitely did. I've got a decent, not massive, but I've got a decent Twitter profile and now Instagram, which I've sort of joined fairly recently. And I'm fairly active on social media. And so I think that definitely helps, because I think, as all authors know nowadays, whatever level you're at, you have to do a lot of your own promotion. Yeah. And if you have a decent social media platform to do it from, that clearly helps. So I think that definitely did help. And the fact that you have written several books before and they know that you're not a one-hit wonder helps as well. But really, they're all about this book and what will the next one be, and I got a 2-book deal, but obviously the second book has to be the same genre. That's part of the deal.
Yeah, of course, yeah. And how did you find the actual, in terms of, obviously it sounds like it was easier from the point of view that it was, as you say, it was a lot quicker this time. But did you find that you were, in terms of how you approached it, both mentally and practically, were there things that you'd learned from the first time round in terms of your cover letter or your synopsis or any of that sort of stuff?
Oh, the dreaded synopsis. That never gets easier.
I don't know anybody. I'm yet to meet anybody that likes that.
It's hideous. But what I had this time, I think, that I never really had before, was a really good elevator pitch, a really snappy few lines that I really honed and perfected those few lines, and that came at the top of everything. And a few people said that had really grabbed them. And then the synopsis is hell, and I just hate writing them, and I don't think I've got any better at that. But I don't think before I ever wrote an elevator pitch, I just think I wrote a long, boring synopsis, which probably didn't help. So I think really being able to sum up your book in just a few snappy lines really, really made a difference. I think that helped a lot. So I honestly think as well, I'm just more thick-skinned now, and the rejections weren't as hard to take and didn't get me down and didn't make me think, oh, this is useless and I might as well give up,
Because you'd already been through it once.
Because I'd been through it, and I just persisted, and it didn't take that long this time. And I think it's never easy though. It's never easy because you're putting yourself out there, and especially with a book that's totally different, it's always going to be difficult. But you just got to keep going, don't you?
Definitely. Do you find, with the dreaded synopsis, how do you have you got a set way that you actually approach it now? In terms of, do you just try and, because some people do it where they will try and basically just remember the novel, on what the bits that they remember, that's the bits that they consider are important enough to the synopsis, or do you go back through your chapter plan if you've got one, or how do you sort of approach it?
Yeah, I'm a big planner. I know you're not so much of a planner, are you?
I'm trying to work on it. Yeah.
So I do have I don't plan every single chapter in detail, but I do have a chapter structure, and I think when I wrote my synopsis for this last book, I sort of I almost do it like a jigsaw. So with a jigsaw, you sort of start with the corners, and then you kind of fill in the edges, and then you fill in the middle. I sort of started with the beginning and the end of the synopsis. This is how it begins, this is how it ends, and then I filled in a few key points in the middle that I felt had to go in because they were important. They were plot twists or they were turning points, and then I kind of fleshed out just a bit in between. But even so, to get it to 2 pages, or sometimes 1 page.
I was going to say, because some of the ones that, my submissions, most of them are to agents, but a couple of them were to well, one of them was an online imprint that's looking for unagented, and one of them was a competition, and I can't remember there was a couple, I think it was in the agency, that literally won 1 page.
Oh.
I know, and you find yourself almost cheating, if I make the font a bit smaller.
Make it smaller and do it single-spaced instead of double-spaced.
Yeah, single-spaced, and doing things like, I'd kind of originally got it kind of nicely laid out into nice paragraphs. I thought, well, that's, and that's another bit, and that's another bit. And then it's like, okay, no, combine those 3 paragraphs. That's going into one. It's the only way that I can get it in. But then, to be honest, as I've gone along, I kind of have got more and more brutal with it because I think, rightly or wrong, like you say, I think if you've got some really big twists that you think, well, they need to know that you know what you're talking about and that they're exciting, I think those have got to go in. But I do think the rest of it, really, the more I've spoken to people. I spoke to an older author in my critique group once, and I think she kind of hit the nail on the head, really. She sort of said, well, your cover letter is obviously the starting point in terms of, you know, they might not get past your cover letter, depending on what's in your cover letter. They might just decide, A, it's not for them, or B, you sound like a lunatic and they don't want anything to do with you. But if they get past your cover letter, then the first thing that they're going to do, they don't normally go to your synopsis. They go to your first chapter or your early chapters that you've sent. Yeah. And if they get past the first page of your first chapter, then you're winning. If you know, and if they get to the end of the chapters that you've submitted, you know, whatever, you know, however many pages that is or chapters that it is or whatever, then you know you're winning a bit more. And then the chances are, then they might look at your synopsis then, or even then they might just ask you for a full manuscript submission.
I agree. I think a lot of the time that dreaded synopsis does not get read. I do, honestly. So I don't know why they keep asking for it. But I agree. I think that quite often they go straight to the chapters. If they don't like the chapters, they won't even bother reading the synopsis. And as you say, if they do like the chapters, they might have a quick peek at the synopsis then to see how the book ends. But more likely they will just call you and ask for a full manuscript. So I think we probably stress too much about the synopsis, but at the same time, if they want it, you've got to try and make it as good as possible, don't you? So it's horrible. I hate it. Hate it.
It is. It's absolutely horrible because you just constantly think it's kind of like editing on steroids, because obviously with editing, there's this whole thing about kill your darlings and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But, you know, with a synopsis, it's even worse because you've got such a short amount of time and you're like, oh no, I haven't mentioned that, or I haven't mentioned this character, or, you know, or, I mean, I had a whole thing where I'd edited my synopsis. I mean, I was kind of sending I got a couple of people that were almost like beta reading my synopsis for me. And luckily, because I kept editing, and the last time that I basically cut it right down and then I sent it out to somebody else. And they'd also read the book, luckily, and they sort of said, "Oh, this character that you've mentioned here, we don't know who she is." And I looked back, and I'd basically I'd taken out like 2 sentences or something before, and they were the sentences that kind of introduced it. And it's like, oh my god! So it's quite easy to do that, you know, because you just like edit it down.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
it is interesting. So having, you know, I think it's like, what is it, 3 years since we spoke to you last time, I think it is.
Is it that long?
I think it is. I think I had a quick look. I had a quick look, and I think it is. So in that time, you know, has being a published author, because when we first spoke to you, you'd just been published. So has it kind of lived up to what you thought it'd be? Has it been different? What, you know, or what surprised you?
Oh gosh, I mean, it's been brilliant. Not rich by any means. You don't make that much money unless you're J.K. Rowling, etc.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there've been so many plus points. So my first 3 books came out in fairly quick succession. So I think I signed my deal in 2014. The first book came out 2015, 2016. There was a break in 2017 to do with the publisher, not to do with me. The book was ready, and then the third one came out in 2018. So it was almost a book a year, and it's been so lovely in so many ways, because when it's a series, you get people who come back for the next one and the next one. So you get people who contact you and say, I feel like these characters are like my friends now, and I can't wait for the next one. And that's really nice, getting that sort of feedback and reaction from people. And also I've got to do lots of awfully things like go to literature festivals and speak on panels and things like that, which has been so much fun, and which I sort of didn't think about when I just sat down to write my first book. I didn't think about all the extra bits that you get to do. I've done radio interviews, I've done magazine interviews. So it's been really fun. I have a full-time job still, and it's all fitting it in around that. But it's like a really, really nice hobby that is fun, and you meet lots of lovely people, and you make a little bit of money. So you know, it's all good. It's all good. I can't think of any negatives apart from the 1-star reviews.
Well, I was
horrible.
I was going to ask you about that, not specifically about 1-star reviews and whether or not. I think everybody's got some 1-star reviews, but about, you kind of alluded to it there. The kind of whole fan thing, that once this first, especially if it's a series and it goes out into the world, and you start to get this feedback, good and bad, obviously. How have you coped with that, and did it influence you at all, sort of after the first book, or when you were writing the second or the third book?
I find, the first book was actually kind of hard in some ways, because it was my first book and it had lots of good reviews, but it had a few, as we all do, it had some really bad reviews. I mean, terrible reviews. People who said I should stick to the day job, and they wouldn't pay a penny for it, and awful stuff like this.
Yeah.
And the problem is, if I look at that book now, I think that book has 90 something reviews, and only a small handful of them are 1 and 2 star. Most of them are. And that's the way with most authors, but it's those few that you think about and you dwell on and you worry about, and I actually had this really bad sort of period of a month or so, not long after the book came out, when the first few bad reviews came out. I got so anxious about them, and I actually thought, can I do this? Do I want to write another book? Do I want to put myself through this? Mm-hmm. And it didn't last that long, and I spoke to some other authors, and they all said, hey, you don't even have to read those reviews, just don't read them. Or the best advice was from lovely Katie Ford, who, Katie Ford, she's a fabulous romance writer. Yeah. She's just had another best-selling book, fabulous. And she lives not far from me in Gloucestershire. And we're kind of there's a lovely group of local authors who get together for lunch now and again. And it's really nice. And that's another great thing about being an author, is that other authors club. Are they're so supportive. It's not
I agree.
There's no competition. That's surprising. I thought that other authors would be all like, oh, your book's selling better than my book. But it's not like that. Everyone's so supportive. So Katie Ford said to me, if you ever get a bad review and you read it, go to some really famous author, go to someone who's had a massive bestseller and look at their reviews, and they have shocking reviews as well as the good ones. And I did that, and it does make you feel better. It does. It
does, because you can you can go, like I've said this before, but you can go and look at the Amazon reviews for like classics, like supposedly unassailably fantastic, works of art or whatever, and you can still find loads and loads and loads of 1-star reviews.
Absolutely.
There's no accounting for taste, and there is an element with some things. There is an element of trolling and that kind of thing, and people,
of course.
They're just going to do it anyway. But also, I completely understand. I should imagine it'd be more or less impossible to not take some of them personally. But it is interesting, though, that we're kind of most of us tend to be more likely to take on board, as you say, that little handful of terrible reviews, as opposed to, the majority of good ones.
It's weird, isn't it? It's that author insecurity thing. I think as a breed, we're very insecure, and almost every author I know is like that. We get so scared when a new book's coming out, and we get paranoid about reviews. I've kind of got over the review thing now. In fact, I've actually got to the point where I can kind of laugh at some of the bad reviews, because some of them are very funny.
Yeah, they are.
And they're really entertaining, actually. And you just have to think, well, I don't like every book I've ever read.
No.
So you can't take it personally. You just can't, and it's fine.
And you can't. And like, as regards that, I was going to ask you about the self-doubt kind of thing. I mean, it sounds like you, like most other people, it's something that rears its ugly head from time to time. Do you think that's got better or worse? Have you gained in confidence with the more books that you've written and had published?
I don't think so. Basically, the book, my new book, Am I Guilty, which is out now, But I've already written the second book in my 2-book deal for Harper Collins, and it's not out for ages yet. But I've submitted it to my editor, and I've heard nothing at all. You think, oh, she's read it and she hates it, and she's plucking up the courage to tell me it's rubbish. And so I saw her today, and I said, have you started reading it yet? And she says, no. She says, no, I've got about 8 manuscripts to get through before I get to that one. She said, no, I'll get to it eventually. And I thought, oh, for goodness sake, and I'm just, you're still paranoid. I don't know what it is. Every book I write, I think it's okay at times, and then I think it's the worst book in the world, and nobody's ever going to read it. I don't know if that ever goes away, to be honest.
I think you're right. I think with a lot of people, I think it's this kind of feeling that you're almost like you're getting away with it, and you're waiting to get found out. And you think, this is going to be the one. When I send this one in, they're going to find me out. This is the one.
Yeah.
Because I was just, before I came on air here, I was editing the podcast that will go out tomorrow as we record this with Victoria Selman, and she was saying something similar. I think she just submitted the next book in her series, and it was the same thing. I think she'd literally only just sent it, and she was already thinking, oh my God, will they like it, sort of thing?
Well,
will my editor like it? Sort of thing.
It's terrible. And I sent mine to my agent at the same time, and she hasn't said anything yet either. And they've both had it for about 3 weeks. I'm thinking everybody hates it. But it's just they haven't had time to read it yet, so I have to just tell myself that, and it's fine.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm sure it will be fine, but you never stop worrying.
You just forget that these people have got other clients and everything else to deal with, so it's kind of quite easy to forget it. So what about your actual writing process? do you think you've grown as a writer? What do you think you've learned from working with professional editors in particular?
Oh my goodness, I have learned so much, honestly. My first book took me, I mean, admittedly, I wrote and put it away and wrote and put it away, but I think it took me 5 or 6 years to write my first book. My most recent book, the one that got me my Harper Collins deal, took me 5 months from start to finish. I've got so much faster, and that's just because I've just got a much more, I suppose partly it's practice maybe, and now I know how to sort of structure a book, and I'm not sort of rewriting the first chapter 56 times, which is what I did with my first book. What I do now is I write that first draft and I just don't look back. I just write till I get to the end, and then I go back and fix it. And that's something that has transformed the speed of my writing, definitely, because before I used to fiddle and faff and tweak and edit, and you never get anywhere if you're going to spend, weeks and weeks on chapter 1. It just doesn't work. So I think that's definitely improved. I'm just, much more focused about it now, and I just think, right, get it down, get the story down, fix it afterwards. So that's really helped a lot. And working with editors, I mean, oh gosh, I've been so lucky because I've had great editors, and really, I think I was really nervous, especially about working with Harper Collins and, such a big name and everything. And I thought, my goodness, they're going to be really tough on me and they're going to change the whole book. And actually, an editor is there to make your book better. They're not there to change the whole book into something else. That's not what they do. And they're there to make it better. And if you just take their advice, you don't have to do everything they say. Which I thought originally that's how it worked, and I would try desperately to do everything they said instead of saying, hang on a minute, actually I don't think this bit's going to work, but I'll do that, but this bit isn't going to work. And I've learned that as well, that I don't have to obey every single thing, but that generally they are right, generally, because they know what they're doing. So my relationship with my editors has always been very good, and I think you learn that actually they're not there to criticize you and to change your work into something else. They're there to help and make it better. And if you kind of accept that and work with what they say without following it to the letter, then your book just ends up so much better.
So, did you find when you first started, did you find it was the same sorts of notes that you were getting back? Is it because, like, a lot of writers will say, well, my particular thing that I tend to get notes back on is this. It might be characterization, or it might be story structure, or it might be, did you have a certain thing? Did you tend to find the same sorts of things coming back for the first few times? I probably did, actually. I think I tend to overwrite a bit, and I get a bit lost in descriptions sometimes, and really it's not necessary. So I really had to cut chunks of unnecessary description out quite a lot at the beginning. I also really overuse certain words. People sigh a lot. Everybody does that. Yeah.
What's yours? Because mine is sighing. There's a lot of sighing.
Yeah,
and rolling of eyes.
I'm bad for sighing, but also nodding. She nodded because I don't really like to use too many speech tags. I tend to use an action. It's usually an action and then they speak. Not all the time, and a lot of the time, if there's just two people in the scene, then I'm happy to just drop the tags off big chunks of it, just so that you just keep the back, the back and forth going. But I am bad for nodded, she nodded. Chuckle was a word for some reason. I don't know why that word came up loads. And it got picked up by a couple of people. Yeah, it's like everyone's always chuckling. Why are people chuckling?
Don't chuckle enough. I love chuckle. That's
I like it, but I think it was overused, and I think one person that was kind of giving me some critique on an early draft was kind of. I sort of disagree with this sentence, but to her it was like, I just think it's childish. I just think it's something that kids do. It's like a chuckling thing, and I'm like, well, no. I think I chuckle sometimes. It's kind of not an out. Yeah, snigger's a good word, actually.
Snigger, but people snigger too much in my books, apparently.
Yeah.
But it is that sort of when they say you've used that word again and again. Oh gosh, I really do, don't I? A few times I've had, weirdly and totally unaware of it, had characters with the same name and not realised it. I think in one of my books I had a police officer called Elaine, and then a character's wife called Elaine, and my editor said people are going to get mixed up because they won't know which Elaine it is, and to me it was totally clear, but but they can't both be called Elaine, apparently.
It's Stephen with a V and Stephen with a PH. I mean, it's quite obvious.
So yeah, I have to watch that. I seem to run out of names in my head and use the same one for different people.
Well, yeah, because there's a school of thought that says you should try to not even use names that have the same first letter if you can help it. But it's easy to do. I mean, I've had it in my first drafts, and I've picked it up myself when I've started to do my self-edit. I've had it where someone's name has actually changed from the beginning to the end, and I've not noticed. I had a father and son character, and over the course of the novel, because the son was like the main character, they took on the father's name without me realising it. I just thought it was a better name, so I ended up changing it.
Gosh.
But I've done that before. But it's a bit embarrassing, if you send it to somebody and they look at it. But I think before you write a novel, if somebody hasn't tried to write a novel before, I think it's difficult to relate to just the amount of information you kind of have to hold in your head at any one time, and you just can't do it. You can't hold the whole thing in your head at the one time. That's what makes editing, especially the first kind of structural edit, I think it's kind of the really deep thinking part of it, and it's the complicated bit where you kind of have to keep all the balls up in the air and try and work out where they're going to land. And I don't envy an editor's job, actually. I think they've got a tough job. I'm not sure I could do it. No, I agree. I think
it's really tricky.
Yeah, I think probably the thing that kind of gives them a bit of a head start is the fact that they're not personally invested in it, so they're probably not as precious about, we can just get rid of that story strand or kill that character off, or whatever from that point of view. So what would you say, just kind of as we work towards kind of wrapping things up, so what would you say is the best piece of writing or creative advice that you've had, and what would you say is the worst? Or something that's not worked for you?
Well, I'll tell you, yes, I know. I've listened to you asking other people this, so I've semi-prepared this answer.
Oh, that's good.
Because it's actually quite tricky to think of this. But the best piece definitely is what I said earlier about getting that first draft down. That has absolutely transformed the speed I can write at and stopped me faffing around and wasting weeks on trying to perfect a chapter without moving on. So for me, getting that first draft down as quickly as possible, in a few weeks or a couple of months, or however long it takes, but get it down. Don't look back. Don't go back even to yesterday's writing. Just get it down. And that has made a huge difference to me. The worst, and this is slightly controversial because I've actually heard people on your podcast saying that this is the best.
That's good. That's the great thing about all this stuff, though. It is subjective.
Yeah. Well, I think the worst advice for me was the advice that you should write every day, even if it's just a few words.
Yeah.
A lot of people say that, and it works obviously for some people. But for me, I thought I'm going to try that. I'm going to try and write a little bit every day, even if it's a couple of hundred words. I'm just going to do that. Oh my goodness, I got to the point where I was so stressed about trying to fit those words in that I thought, I hate writing, I don't want to do this anymore.
It became a chore.
It just put me off. And so for me, that was terrible advice, and it didn't work. And I write in fits and starts usually. If I'm writing a book and I know that I want to get it finished by a certain deadline, I'll write probably maybe 3 days a week. Because I work 4 days a week, you see. So I've got 3 days that I can write. But that's pretty much it. I don't tend to write every day. And that works for me. That's enough days a week to keep me in the story in my head.
I think that's fine, though. But I think, speaking personally, when I've kind of gone, the peaks and troughs of writing and trying to get through the first draft for the novel that's now on submission, I think, and you go through all the self-doubt and everything else, I think it's more like you tend to get a problem. It's not necessarily that it has to be every single day, but I think if you get to a stage where it's been a week and then sort of a week becomes 2 weeks and then it's sort of 3 weeks and then you go back to it
and you've forgotten what you were talking about.
And the tone of it, and you've kind of got to reread what you've written, which is not a good idea anyway, because I agree with you. I think it's the thing that I've definitely learned is you've really got to go with the momentum of it, and just kind of push on and not try and edit the stuff that you've written before and start moving things around and changing it, and just constantly thinking, especially at the beginning, because you are sort of writing, even whether you plot or you don't, you still are sort of writing your way into it, and you're finding you're getting the voice of whatever the book is that you're doing at the time sorted, and kind of thinking of the tone of it and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, my big thing really is dialogue. That's kind of when it comes to life. For me, it's like when the characters start just talking and having like big long conversation initially,
Yeah.
that's when
Yeah.
I suddenly think, right, and now I know this character. I normally get to know the characters through what they say initially.
Yes.
And I'm like, I've got a handle on it now, and I know that sounds weird. It's like what they say,
No,
but
I
you're
totally
telling them
get it.
what to say. But sometimes you just think in the moment, and you're writing, you think, well, that's what that person would say there, and sometimes it surprises you, and
Yes, absolutely.
or you write something and you think, no, they definitely would not.
No,
say
they wouldn't
that.
say
They
that.
wouldn't take that, and that's kind of how you get to know. It is weird.
People who hear us talking about the characters taking on a life of their own say, "Oh, don't be ridiculous!
I know
you're
they
the writer," but they do. It's the weirdest thing. They take you in places that you weren't expecting to go. They take the book in different directions that you weren't expecting to go, and it's a bizarre thing, isn't it? They come alive.
They do, and I think, I think it's sort of. Although I've never done any, apart from in my youth, I've never really done any like serious acting or anything. But I think it's a similar sort of thing, because I think you do sort of have to inhabit the role of each character that you've got, each main character that you've got in the book. I think you do take them on and you learn who they are as however you get into that. Some people they like interview their characters and all those sorts of different things that you can do. But you sort of, however you want to do it, you sort of get to know them, and after a period of time, you just know what they would and wouldn't do. And I think you stop thinking about it like logically, sort of planning and plotting things out so much. And it tends to just be, you just know when something's not right, or the way that they react to things.
That's the joy of writing a series as well, because then you've got your same characters, so you know. You know what they're going to do, and because your second book's isn't it a sequel?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
So I think it's definitely easier when you've got your characters established, because you already know them and you know what they would do. So it's just about creating a new plot for them to play in, isn't it?
Yeah,
really?
yeah. But it's funny because I didn't, when I was sort of, I don't know, really in the woods with the book before, I was kind of the mind that like this is definitely a standalone. I'm definitely not going to be doing any more of these, and I can't see where else this is going to go on this. And I was thinking I just want to do something different, that kind of thing. But it is quite interesting after it's sat for a while, and then you edit it, and then you start to think, oh, there's that thing that I kind of subconsciously or not, I've kind of laid down some foundations for something that might happen later there, and all that kind of thing. But yeah, you're definitely right. And I think that the joy of it as well is like, as opposed to like, say, a sitcom or something where the character doesn't change, at the end of the half an hour or whatever it is. Obviously, your characters do develop and they move on. And I like the fact that they're slightly, they are going to be slightly different to the last time that you wrote about them. They've
moved on in their life, haven't they? And things have happened to them, and But that's the joy of a series. I mean, I'm into standalone territory now with this current book and the next book, and I think it probably is a bit harder writing standalones. But at the same time, it's quite exciting, because then you're creating a whole new world of new characters, and that's nice too. So
I think so, and I think it's probably being open-minded about it, because again, I've heard lots of people say that in the past that they're definitely writing a standalone, like I thought I was. But then, one particular character sometimes will be, or sometimes you see things where, I mean, I know, like, I think William Shaw, who've had on the podcast before, he'd like written like a long series, and then he wrote what he thought was going to be a standalone, which it kind of is a standalone, but like a secondary character in the standalone then became the subject of a series.
Oh, right, interesting. Great.
She kind of took over. He obviously thought, well, she's a really interesting character, so she's sort of taken on the series. So that happens as well. So, so you kind of answered my next question, but so they are, well, only in the fact that they are standalone. So could give us an idea of what's up next then. So what have you?
Ooh.
Can you talk about it yet?
This is the one that my editor or my agent haven't even read yet. But oh gosh, how much can I tell you about that one? It's about a woman whose husband suddenly vanishes. She comes home from a conference, and her husband, who she was expecting to be there cooking her dinner, is not there. And oh gosh, I don't know how much I can say. And then the police start to investigate, and they start to basically think that she might be responsible. She's involved in some way.
Yeah.
Right? And it's kind of flips between the police investigation and her point of view, and it's almost like, well, is she telling the truth, or it's that style of book. But that's what it is at the moment, and it's in early stages, and of course edits could change a lot, but that's sort of what it's basically about at the moment.
Oh, that's
one.
great.
But that one, I'm not even sure when that will be out. I think it might be the end of this year or the beginning of next year, possibly.
Still fairly rapid, though, really.
Yes, they do seem to like to do that.
It
Yes.
seems to be changing because in traditional
Yeah.
publishing, because I don't think that was the case before. Whether it's something that's kind of started more on the back, partly on the back of indie publishing, and also this kind of Netflix binge reading and watching culture, I don't know, but you're probably the second or third person I've spoken to recently that's had books coming out. And it seems a much quicker succession, because usually when I speak to traditionally published people, you know, I've had people that have written the first book's about to come out and they've written the third book.
Gosh,
and the third book's not coming out for like 2 years or something, and it's like, geez.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it is interesting, and I agree. I've heard a few people who've recently got deals who are bringing out, 2 books in a year, and I think they're just trying to, if people like your first book, they kind of want your second book quick, and maybe it's to capitalise on that, I suppose. But yeah, it's definitely a trend. So it puts quite a lot of pressure on you as an author, I think, because you're expected to write books much faster and maybe produce 2 books a year instead of 1 or whatever it is. So and it's hard to fit that in, obviously, around a full-time job as well. So.
Well, I lied actually, because that was going to be my last question. But just on one of the other questions, just quickly, that I think I asked you this last time, but I'm sure people are not going to dig back in the archives. And I can't actually remember what you said, and now you've kind of got even more books out, so it seems more relevant. So how do you manage to fit all this writing and all these books and everything else
around?
Because you have got a very busy job and you do work quite unsociable hours a lot of the time, as you kind of alluded to earlier with your 6 o'clock starts and stuff.
I do. I work. This morning I've been up since 3 o'clock. I've driven from Gloucestershire to London. I've done a shift at work. I work for a shopping channel, as you know, and then I've done my filming with Harper Collins. And so today's been a bit crazy. But how it normally works for me is I work 4 days a week, and on those 4 days a week, with a 200-odd mile commute as well on top of a long work day, I just have no time to write. I just don't. So I just don't even beat myself up about it. The 3 days that I'm off, which are 3 random days every week, they are my writing days. And that's just how it has to be. And I get as much writing as I can during those days. And it seems to work, because when I sit down to write, I really do sit down to write. I'm pretty good at not getting distracted by cat videos on YouTube and stuff like that. I do put my head down and write. But it is hard to fit it in. And there are days when I'm off. I never really take a day off. I'm either at work or I'm writing. At the moment, I'm running as well, because I'm trying to run 1,000 miles for charity this year.
I saw that. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Yeah,
it's a lot of running. It fends off writer's bum, which is a good thing, because that's a common complaint among certainly female authors. Your bum tends to spread.
Yeah.
But so I'm trying to. So sometimes I honestly get up at 5 o'clock on my days off to fit everything in, and that's just how it is. But at the moment, I can do that. I feel sort of I've got enough energy to do that. I don't know if I'll be able to do that forever, but it is definitely tough fitting it in. But I wouldn't do it if I didn't love it.
I was going to say that there's obviously must be an element of it that you just enjoy it. So. It's not really a chore.
It's not a chore. No, it isn't. But, it isn't easy. And there are days where I think, I don't want to write today. I just want to sit down and watch Coronation Street or something, But you kind of have to make yourself do it. And then,
Have you got any little kind of mental tricks or anything that you do when you feel like that? How do you kind of get into it?
Yeah, I do. I say, right, all you have to do is sit down and write for half an hour. And that's it. And then you can stop. And then inevitably, most of the time when I get to half an hour, I'm into it, and I'll sit there for 2 hours or 3 hours. So I have to almost trick myself into it and say, you don't have to do it. It's fine. Just do 20 minutes, half an hour. And that generally works. If it doesn't, I think, right, sod it, give up for the day. You do need to take a few hours off occasionally. You do, because you get burnt out in your head, don't you? So
you do, yeah, and you sort of need to fill the creative well and all that kind of stuff. Well, brilliant. Well, it's been so much fun to talk to you. I feel like I need to let you go and sleep, if nothing else.
Thank you, Wayne. Thanks, I'm quite tired.
So where can people find you and your work online, Jackie?
Right. Well, I am online on Twitter, which is at Jackie Kabler, and I'm on Instagram, which is at official Jackie Kabler. I feel I must qualify that slightly embarrassing name by saying that when I joined Instagram, there was a fake Jackie Kabler on Instagram.
Already?
Yes, it was. They'd taken my pictures and were pretending to be me for some bizarre reason. I don't know why. So I couldn't be Jackie Kabler on Instagram. I had to be something else. So a friend said, "Oh, just be official Jackie Kabler."
That's good.
Right, so I am. So that's why it sounds a bit.
Were they sort of, was it kind of like a comedy account, or were they literally just trying to be as normal as possible?
I don't know. Who knows what
What's
goes
wrong
through
with people?
people's
Yeah.
minds on social media. They had just taken some of my pictures and they'd stolen my biography, and they
Right.
just put a few pictures on there, and I don't know.
Because I quite like some of the joke ones. You know, you see some of the ones that
Yeah.
are obviously fake, and they post
No, this
funny
was just
comments.
a weird one. I think I don't know if
just
it's still
wanted
there.
to
I
be
asked I don't know, but who knows? So yeah, official Jackie Kabler on Instagram. Ignore the other Jackie Kabler, that's not me. And I am on Facebook, but I am the worst Facebooker in the world.
Me
I can
too.
go 3 months without looking. I don't really like it.
I hate Facebook.
But publishers kind of like you to be on it. To
I
be
know
honest.
they do,
Like,
yeah.
Yeah, so I am on Facebook. It's what's it? Jackie Kabler author. Yeah, Jackie Kabler author on
okay.
Facebook. But honestly, I'm not there very often. But yes.
I hate
And my
it.
books are all on Amazon at the moment. My first 3 are on there, but also the new one is out in ebook, of course, now. And paperback will be coming in June. You can find that at the moment on pre-order on Amazon as well.
Brilliant. Well, good luck with it all. Really look forward to
Thank
seeing how
you.
it pans out with the new Darker Edge stuff as well.
Thank you so much. And it's been really nice
yeah,
to talk to you.
You too. Great talking to you. Thanks a million, Jackie. That's
Thanks,
great.
Wayne. Bye.
Okay, thanks again to Jackie, and do make sure you check out Am I Guilty, which is out right now. I'll put all of those links in the show notes over at joinedupwriting.co.uk. That's pretty much it for this week, but don't forget you can find the entire back catalogue of interviews on the website. Make sure you subscribe at Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, Overcast, or wherever else you get your podcasts from to have the show downloaded automatically every week. And don't forget to sign up for the newsletter where you get free stuff, including the 3-act story structure on there to help you edit or plan your novel. And don't forget to look out for the next episode when I'll be chatting to Ros Morris about her Nail Your Novel series of writing books. Until then, thanks for listening. I'm Wayne Kelly. Happy writing and reading, and I'll see you next time.
Joined up writing.